Good morning, Willowbrook. Today we find ourselves in Revelation chapter 8. And let me just say, I'm so very proud of you for taking the New Testament challenge and making it all the way to the last book of the Bible. In the great tribulation that occurs after God has taken the church to heaven, which we refer to as the rapture, there are a series of judgments. The first are called the seven seals. Then we have the seven trumpets, followed up by the seven bowls. Actually, the seventh seal that is broken begins the judgment that we refer to as the seven trumpets. And we begin reading in chapter 8, verse 1, where it says, "He opened the seventh seal, and there was silence in heaven for about half an hour." That's a very interesting verse. Silence in heaven. In just the previous chapter, chapter 7, we saw a great celebration and very loud worship in heaven taking place. And now all of a sudden, silence. And very specific, for half an hour. It's almost like the lull before the storm. Maybe when that seventh seal was opened and it was and the full scroll was unrolled, the host of heaven could see what was coming. And what's coming is judgment. In verse 2, 7 angels are given 7 trumpets that they will soon blow. Then it shows in verse 3 another angel who had a golden censer and was standing at the altar. And he offered this incense, and it was with the prayers of God's people. Let me tie it in a little bit to a Christmas story. Remember John the Baptist's father, Zechariah? He was a priest. And Luke chapter 1 tells us that he went into the temple and he was there to offer incense when the angel appeared and said, "Your wife, even in her old age, is going to give birth to a son. You'll name him John." So this is the altar, and the incense is mingled with the prayers of God's people. Just a quick reminder, your prayers are always heard in heaven. When you pray, God hears, God answers. And now the judgments begin. We have the first angel sounding his trumpet in verse 7. And when the trumpet is sounded, hail mixed with fire and blood falls upon the earth, and a third of the earth is burned up, a third of the trees, a third of the green grass. There are a lot of people who try to figure out what exactly is happening. Some scholars have said maybe it's volcanic eruptions all over the earth. It could simply just be the supernatural judgment of Almighty God. But this will occur, and a third of the earth is burned up. I like to be very environmental aware. We should recycle. We should protect this beautiful planet God gave us. But in the last judgments, all of this that we try to protect is going to experience upheaval in a very violent way. The second angel sounds his trumpet in verse 8, and it says something like a huge mountain all ablaze was thrown into the sea. It does not say it was a mountain on fire. Notice it says like a mountain on fire. So we don't know. It could have been an asteroid. It could have been a meteor. And all of the gases with it are thrown into the sea. And a third of the sea turns into blood. And this reminds us of the plague that God sent upon the Egyptians when Moses went and demanded Pharaoh set the people free. Remember when he turned the Nile into blood? The first trumpet that we saw also reminds us of one of those plagues. They had a plague of hail. That was the 7th plague sent upon the Egyptians. You believe it happened with the Egyptians. It's a matter of history. And one day, these things will happen. It's a matter of prophecy. And the sea will be turned into blood. All of the fish, a third of the living creatures will die. Our neighborhood lake, they had to drain it and dredge it. And when they did, there were dead fish everywhere. We had dozens of buzzards in our backyard. It smelled. And this is just a little half-acre lake. Imagine when it is every ocean in the world. A third angel sounds his trumpet, and a great star blazing like a torch falls from the sky, and it affects the rivers, a third of the rivers, a third of the streams. Perhaps it was a comet, we don't know for sure, but we've gone from burning up the grass and the trees, to the oceans, now to the fresh water. You can't drink it. It's going to become bitter like wormwood. And then a fourth angel sounds his trumpet, and the judgment is affected in the skies. A third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon and the stars. And so it's not as bright. It's a 1/3 less light. Also reminding us of the 9th plague sent upon the Egyptians when they had 3 days of total darkness. The Bible said it was a darkness that could be felt. This perhaps could be a temporary judgment, because later in chapter 16, one of the bowl judgments tells us that the sun will burn people with intense fiery heat. However, this is accomplished, whether by some kind of natural disaster or by a supernatural hand of God, it will be so bad that it says an eagle in the final verse begins flying through the air with a loud voice saying, "Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth," because of the trumpets that are about to blast. We'll see those tomorrow. 3 woes for the 3 trumpet blasts of judgment to come. Now, I realize you'd rather hear a story about baby Jesus in a manger right now. But this is reality, and this is the future of those who get left behind. You're in good shape. I believe you're watching this. You're a follower of Christ. What I ask you to do is think about friends, family members, people you work with or go to school with who don't yet know Jesus. You and I will be taken out. We won't experience all of this judgment. We'll be with God in heaven. But if there's someone you know who doesn't know Christ in a personal way, perhaps you can invite them to the Christmas Eve service at our church. I promise they'll hear the gospel. And after you study Revelation, you realize you don't want anyone, not your worst enemy, to experience these judgments. Church family, I love you very much. Have a great day. And tomorrow we'll look at chapter 9.